So hi everyone, I'm Jessica Aguilé. I'm Executive Director at Alliance for a Green Economy, a member of the Renewable Heat Now campaign, and so excited to have all of you on here. If you could, coming in, please in the chat, tell us your name, your location, and your favorite way to celebrate, because we are in a celebratory mood tonight. And while you all are doing that, I will tell you that I am in Syracuse, unceded territory of the Onondaga Nation. And my favorite way to celebrate is to gather with my friends, put on good music, and put my feet up. Okay, for anybody that's just joined, we are doing a quick little welcome here in the chat to tell us your name, your location, and your favorite way to celebrate. Great, and I think we can probably get started with the next slide. Okay, so just a quick rundown of what we're going to do today. We just did our welcome. We're going to celebrate our movement and all the amazing work that all of you did and that we did together during this last legislative session and the lead up to the legislative session. We're going to do some thank yous to some of our elected officials who really came through for us. And then we're going to focus on just some updates on what did we win, get you all up to speed on what happened at the end. And then we're going to talk about what's next for some of the bills that did not pass this session. And we'll round it out by talking about what we are going to be doing this summer. Next slide. Okay, but before we get into all of that, let's just take a minute to look back at what we all did this last year, because it has been an amazing ride. Coming into this legislative session with a huge agenda as a coalition and a campaign with many all of you. And we just want to take a minute to celebrate that and look back at what we did. And we have a special slideshow for that. So Bryn, when you're ready, I think you can run the slideshow. So as you can see here, we have had so many times when we have shown up and done so many things in Albany and around the state, speaking up for our legislative package. Just saw Buffalo, that was Rochester. I think this is probably a lobby team talking to legislators. Great actions in Albany to kick fossil fuels out of buildings. Multiple times we showed up there. Also went and thanked a lot of legislators along the way who signed on to our package. All these wonderful friends and allies and members of our movement from across the state. Another one of our awesome lobby teams talking to legislators. Look at all these times we showed up and had so many people from across the state speaking up to get fossil fuels out of buildings, to beat back the attempt to gut our climate law, to pass the All Electric Building Act and the New York Heat Act and the Energy Efficiency, Equity and Jobs Act, all over the state. Thank you all for showing up so many times in so many places. Someone said rain and snow, we showed up. There was the rain.
All right, I think that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Bryn. And thank you to everybody who was there in those photos and who helped, even if you couldn't come to the events. There were so many folks who made phone calls and helped organize these events. It took so many people to pull off all of those amazing events that we held all over the state. Okay, and we want to give a special shout out to our regional lobby teams. This is a big powerhouse in the Renewable Heat Now campaign. We have teams in multiple regions of the state that come together and strategize around speaking with their elected officials in their region and how to pressure their elected officials if they're not on the bills that we're working to pass. So just really, really want to appreciate all of you who showed up at those regional lobby teams, that showed up at lobby visits, that responded to us time and time again to go meet with your elected officials or call your elected officials or ask them to speak up for the bill at this or that moment. So y'all are a huge, huge engine of this campaign, and we cannot thank you enough for joining these lobby teams. And if you are not already a member of one of the regional lobby teams, we can share a link for how to join one later in this call. All right, next slide. Okay, so we want to take a minute right now to thank our champions in the Senate who really came through in all different times during this legislative session to get the bills in our package passed. So the Senate put the strongest version of the All Electric Building Act and the New York Heat Act in their budgets and really gave us a foothold from which to fight for those policies during the budget time. And were instrumental in getting the All Electric Building Act passed. And they also, just a couple of weeks ago, passed the New York Heat Act in the Senate, really then passing the ball over to the Assembly, which has not yet passed the bill. But we just really, really want to thank our Senate leaders for being such great champions. And we specifically want to thank Senator Krueger, who's the sponsor of the New York Heat Act, and the leader of the Senate, Andrea Stewart Cousins, for her leadership in helping to bring these bills to a vote and get them across the finish line in the Senate. So Andra has just shared in the chat some links for thanking our senators and Senate leaders. And we would invite you to please go to those links and fill out a thank you card for them, because they worked hard for us and it's always good. We pressure them very hard. And in the end, when they do what we ask, it's really important that they know that we saw that they did what we asked and that they get thanked. So I'm just going to give folks just a minute to go to those links. I don't think you can actually click on them. You have to copy and paste the bit.ly links into your browser and fill out a little thank you card for Senator Krueger and Senate Majority Leader Andrea. Anshul just dropped clickable links into the chat. And when you have filled out those cards, if you could put done in the chat so that I can see that folks have done it and know when, how much time to give y'all before I move to the next slide. Just fill them out and then write done in the chat so I know. Okay, so I mentioned that the Senate did pass the New York Heat Act, and in the final days of session, and the Assembly has not yet passed the New York Heat Act. However, so it's not a big surprise that the Senate went first and that the Assembly is a little more challenging. So a big strategy for us has been to build up the number of legislators that are co-sponsoring the New York Heat Act. And we set a goal of 50 co-sponsors this session, and we crushed it. Thanks to all of you. We're now at 64 Assembly members who are co-sponsoring the bill, plus the Assembly sponsor is Assembly Member Fahey. So with Fahey, that's 65 supportive Assembly members. And we are now working to inch and claw our way up to our new goal of 70 co-sponsors. The way that we get sponsors is by people doing lobby visits with their legislators and telling them why this bill is important to them. Constituents calling. We've had so many constituents calling our Assembly members asking them to co-sponsor. Reaching out if you have a legislator that you have a personal relationship with, pressuring, talking in the media about the importance of New York Heat and that a legislator isn't supporting it yet. So there's been so many ways that we've worked to get co-sponsors on this bill, and it's going great, and we need more. So we are asking all of you to take a look at the bill in the Assembly and check to see if your Assembly member is currently a co-sponsor. And if they're not, please call them and ask them why they're not co-sponsoring this legislation yet. We can provide you with talking points about this. Francesca, would you like to share?
Yes, I would. My Assembly member Fred Thiel has been a supporter and ally to us for, throughout the years. But last year, he did not support the All-Electric Buildings Act. And I wouldn't have the New York Heat Act last year, I don't believe. But he came on board this year with a lot of, a lot of pushing, but I have to hand it to him. He did it, and he's a co-sponsor on the New York Heat Act. And I also looked at the chart here, and he's just co-sponsored almost every bill that we are supporting. So I'm just thrilled about that, because otherwise he's just a bright light in a very dark landscape here in red Suffolk County.
Thank you for that, Francesca. Are there others who would like to share? Anshul, I feel like you've worked really hard to get a lot of Assembly members on. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you've used to get Assembly members to co-sponsor?
So I'll add that don't take no for an answer, keep pushing. There was one Assembly member in Rochester who said no, and we were able to convince him. And the other strategy is to basically combine pressure from multiple fronts on social media, tag your Assembly member, call them, have other constituents call them, write to their legislative director and to them, and also try to set up lobby meeting. So if you do all these things together over a short period of time, then it's more likely that they will co-sponsor.
Thank you for that, Anshul. It looks like we have the slides back up, so we will keep going, but feel free to share your experience working to get co-sponsors in the chat. And you can go to the next slide. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the New York Heat Act and our work to get co-sponsors in the Assembly, and all the amazing work that y'all did to crush that goal of 50 and get us up to 64. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk again and celebrate again that we all work together to win the All Electric Building Act in the budget. So just we cannot celebrate this enough. This is such an important piece of legislation that gets fossil fuels out of new construction. It's going to save people in new buildings money. It's going to prevent us from continuing to go backwards on our climate goals, stop digging the hole. And it was an incredible movement that came together to pass that bill against and to overcome multiple arms of the fossil fuel industry that was lobbying against that bill and running an incredibly well-funded communications campaign against the bill. So just want to take a moment to re-celebrate the passage of the All Electric Building Act this session, and to also remember that we protected our Climate Act this session. So you may remember that right before the budget was passed, there was an attempt by the governor and some elected officials in the legislature to insert really bad policy in the budget that would have changed how we count our greenhouse gas emissions, which then ultimately changes how much greenhouse gas we actually reduce. And to open the floodgates for out-of-state so-called renewable natural gas, which is not renewable and is very dirty and bad for the climate and the environment. And the entire environmental movement and climate movement in New York came together, and in just a few days, just completely killed that proposal. The governor had to walk it back, and it didn't get into the budget, and it did not get passed during the session. So there was an amazing effort. So thank you to all of you who worked so hard to protect our climate law. Okay, you can go to the next slide. All right, so we just want to talk a little bit about what happened at the end of session with the New York Heat Act. So as we mentioned, the New York Heat Act did pass the Senate, and thank you to all of you for thanking our senators for doing that. And we gained incredible momentum throughout the whole session. We came very, very close to getting the New York Heat Act in the budget. This is such an important bill that helps us achieve energy affordability and accelerate the transition off of gas in New York State by engaging the utilities and requiring them to be part of this transition. And by taking the money, all the billions of dollars that we're dumping into the outdated gas system, and repurpose it to buy people heat pumps and help people electrify and move entire neighborhoods off of the gas system. So we came very, very close to getting this into the budget. We were relentless. We never stopped, even when only one house, only the Senate put it in their budget proposal. And a lot of folks said, you know, if it's only in one of the budget proposals, it doesn't stand a great chance of getting into the budget. But we fought till the bitter end of the budget, and we came really close to getting it in. After the budget was a month late, so that went on for a while. And after the budget, we had to do a really quick turnaround to try to get the New York Heat Act passed as a standalone bill. Again, with very short notice, so many of you, over 100 people, showed up in Albany to demand the New York Heat Act. We had an incredible rally and press conference and lobby day. And we kept seeing more and more support from organizations across the state and from members of the legislature until the Senate passed the bill. And then all eyes turned to the Assembly, hoping that they would pass the bill. Unfortunately, the Assembly has not moved the bill. You may know that the Assembly is still actually technically in session. They ended, but they're coming back next week. So we're still calling on the Assembly to pass the New York Heat Act. But because it was not on the session agenda at the end, it's going to be a hard lift to get them to pass it, but we are still actively asking them to pass it. And if they don't pass it, we have set ourselves up really well next year to get the New York Heat Act done next year in the budget. We are going to need to do a lot of work between now and then to keep building up support for this bill, to move the governor to support this bill. But it was an incredible effort by all of you to try to get the New York Heat Act past this session. And we're still holding out hope because we are outraged that the Assembly is blocking this legislation, especially after we just saw unbreathable air all across the state due to climate change induced wildfires. So we're still pushing. And if we don't get it this year, we will work with all of you to get it next year. Okay, next slide. We also worked this session with the Energy Democracy Alliance and We Act for Environmental Justice to try to get the Energy Efficiency, Equity, and Jobs Act done. The Senate actually also passed this bill this session. This is a bill that ensures that the energy efficiency retrofits and the jobs for doing those retrofits get to disadvantaged communities, and that the people who need the jobs and need the energy efficiency retrofits the most are able to benefit from them. So it also works to reduce the barriers to energy efficiency by helping to remove health hazards from the home and take care of deferred maintenance so that energy efficiency retrofits can move forward. So this bill also has not passed the Assembly. And right now there's a process going on with the Energy Democracy Alliance and We Act to take a look at that bill. A lot has changed since that bill was written. We're in the middle of an energy efficiency policy revamp at the Public Service Commission right now. So we are looking at different ways to achieve the goals of this bill. And please stay tuned for additional push to accomplish the goals of this bill. Next slide. We also worked this year to develop a proposal for what we were calling the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification or GAP Fund. This fund would be a $2 billion fund that helps low and moderate income households get to a place where they can take advantage of the great heat pump incentives that are available through our utilities and NYSERDA and the Inflation Reduction Act. There are so many things that people need to be able to do in their homes before they can electrify in a lot of cases. And those include energy efficiency retrofits, electrical upgrades, as well as the remediation of lead, mold, and asbestos and other health hazards, because we don't want to seal those health hazards into a home when we're doing an energy efficiency retrofit and weatherization and air sealing. We want to make sure that we're not sealing in bad air and toxins. We want to get those out of the home. And there's just a lot of need to fund those types of pre-electrification and pre-weatherization work so that we make sure that everybody in the state is in a place where they can get a heat pump. So we are going to be coming back for this next year. There's an incredible interest across the whole movement alignment that we need this fund. And we are talking with legislators now about and writing legislation so that we can introduce this fund next year. Next slide. Okay, that is the end of session wrap up from me, and I'm going to pass it over to my friend and colleague Bryn at New Yorkers for Clean Power, also a big member of the Renewable Heat Now campaign, and Bryn holds down our communications working group within the Renewable Heat Now campaign to take us through the rest of the Power Hour.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. That was an amazing recap of all of the work that we did throughout the legislative session. We got a lot done, so it was a lot to share. So thank you for doing that. And thank you again, everyone, for your patience with the Zoom issues. It looks like it was an attempted Zoom bomb that we fended off pretty well, I think. So we're going to keep things moving along. Now we are going to open up a little Zoom poll so that you all can share a little bit more about your experience working with all of us this year, some things you want to change, some things you really liked. So I'm going to open up this poll now, and you all should be seeing it. Let me know if you're not. But the questions included in the poll are: how useful did you find the monthly power hours? And you can answer there. How did you feel about the frequency of e-blasts? So email communications we were sending out, too much, too much, too little, just right, or maybe you aren't receiving them at all. Which pressure tactics do you feel like were most useful to you? So we have a whole bunch of different options here. And then if you did any in-district lobbying, so, being on the ground, talking with your legislators, how was that for you? Did you feel it was effective or not? So we'll take a few moments now to work through those. And if you're done and others are still wrapping up, you can just also take a moment to put some further feedback into the chat. Just share your experience, how you felt it went for you. And I can share some additional questions as well. So I'll reshare my screen now. And we'll just take a few moments. Once you've had a minute to answer the questions in the poll, maybe share a little bit more in the chat, just let me know that you're done, and we'll regroup in a few minutes. And I just want to note, Amber just put in the chat for the question about our e-blast, if you answered e-blast with 3 question marks and you're not on our list yet, but you would like to receive updates about what RHN is up to, where we are in the legislative session or off session, and how you can help us take action, there is a link in the chat to join that list. And you can also sign up for a regional lobbying team at that same link. So take a moment to do that. And I've also just shared some questions on the screen, some things for you to think about moving forward. So how we build a movement, who we bring in, and what skills we want to learn. So take a moment, think back about what you did and where you want to go, and we'll all share together. Okay, it looks like almost everyone has answered these questions. So we're going to go ahead, because I think there are some folks on their phone that might not be able to answer, and I will close the poll, and then you all should be able to see the results. So I'm going to end that now and say share results. And it looks like for most folks, we found the monthly power hours to be very useful with 63%. That's great to hear. We put a lot of time and effort into planning these, thinking about which speakers would make the most sense to have each month, what to share, because there's a lot of information floating around. So very good to hear that these are useful to you all. Going down through the e-blasts, it sounds like we're doing just right with 78%, which is also very helpful to hear, especially from a comms person. We also work very hard on those. And it looks like about 15% of people didn't even know that we had them. So maybe Amber, if you wouldn't mind just putting that link in the chat one more time. Similar to the power hour, we get different things from different spaces, but people that might not be able to make the power hours frequently, but still want to stay in the loop about what's going on. Getting our e-blast is a really great way to do that. Moving on down to which pressure tactics we felt were most useful to us, and you could choose as many as you wanted here, so we'll go down the list. It looks like the most effective ones people felt were the phone relays and emails to legislators. So for the phone relays, I just want to give a quick shout out to Irene, if she's on tonight. Irene has been amazingly instrumental at putting together these phone relays, especially on very quick turnaround, like whenever our Climate Act was under attack, and we really had to band together quickly to start calling the legislators and make sure we were going, one after another. Irene has been great in that. And I'm glad that people like the phone relays. I really like them too. It's a nice way to connect with other people when you're texting the next person, and just to really see the power of the movement when you see how many calls we were able to make in just a day or two. Looks like, oh, thank you. Andre's also flagging that we have lobbying at 81%, so tied with phone relays. Also really great to hear. I think we've done an amazing job at really ramping up our lobbying efforts this year, teaching people how to best lobby, what makes the most sense, kind of crafting their story through that. And I know for me, it's been really helpful to see, learn who represents me and what type of relationship I can build with them to help advocate for the policies that we've been working for. So that's great. And it looks like, all around there was none that people really felt like were totally ineffective, which is also really great to hear. So just continuing going down the list, it looks like we have mobilizations to Albany. Of that, we did many this year. So glad to feel like people were feeling like those were affected too. I know, again, a really great way to kind of show our power and meet others, and again, talk with our legislators. And then going down the list, op-eds and LTEs, of which Anshul has done a really amazing job drafting and writing. Also our friends at Sierra Club that have an amazing group that is doing that as well. And then Twitter, sending out some tweets to our legislators, and then these regional press conferences as well. So last but not least, we have, how was your experience of in-district lobbying? And it sounds like for most folks, it was somewhat effective, which is really helpful to hear. We have about 48%, so a little bit under half people say it's somewhat effective. I think as we are moving into this next legislative session and reflecting on what made the most sense and what didn't, this could be something that could be really helpful to hear within the regional lobbying teams, what experiences people had, what things they found to be really effective and what things they wish they could do better, ways that we could support you throughout these efforts. So we can move into that too after we take our summer break, as we're thinking about kind of going into the next legislative session, what that means for us. But it sounds like, again, 19% of people didn't even know that we did lobbying. So again, you can sign up for a regional lobbying team at the same link for our e-blast. And just like we did last session, we'll do a training to really get everyone caught up to speed on how to lobby, what lobbying is, what it isn't. And then also you'll always have support from our team and through other members of your regional lobby teams. So great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your feedback. It's super, super helpful. And of course is, the whole basis of the movement of being able to contribute to the work that we're doing here, making sure it's all hands on deck and working collectively to help pass these bills and build a better future. So thank you so much for your feedback. I'm going to move us right along here now. I'm going to give myself the next slide. Okay, so as we're moving into the summer, there are some immediate next steps that we can do, of which there are several. So our one big thing that we've been trying to do really over the past day or few days is just help to ramp up our Twitter followers. So for those of you that use Twitter, it's a really, really simple way to stay up to date with what exactly RHN is focusing on, how we're taking action on a day-by-day basis, what we're up to, and how you can get plugged into it. So we're doing a little Twitter blitz of a certain sort where you can follow us on Twitter, or also maybe share a little bit about RHN on Twitter and tag us so that you can help spread the love for the work that we're doing. Twitter is also a really great way to get in direct contact with your legislators. And we've had some really great success literally just by tweeting at our elected officials and telling them what we want them to do and how they can get it done. Andra is also sharing in the chat a few additional tweets from some of our champions that really helped us move these bills. Of course, Pat Fahey's tweet, who's one of the sponsors of the New York Heat Act. We have a few others from Andrea Stewart Cousins, who shared appreciation for our work this session. And you can also tweet at ASC and at Hasty or your assembly person, just to remind them that even if the session is kind of sort of over, there's always space to continue to push for New York Heat. And we want them to remember that we're still here. We're going to keep advocating for this until the very last gavel is slammed down. Okay, last but not least, for our immediate next steps, we have an email action. So we have this great tool that's right on our website. Similar to tweeting at your legislators, you can send them an email and let them know that you would like them to advocate for and support New York Heat and why it matters to you. And while you're at it, you can ask your friend to do the same. So thank you again, Andra, for putting all of those links in the chat. So as we all know, it's a little steamy here in Brooklyn tonight. We are well into summer already. And for us at RHN, that usually means taking some time to rest and recharge and enjoy our summers, and also using opportunities where we're outside more. Maybe if we're tabling with our organizations, we're at farmers markets, we're at block parties, wherever, to spread the word about RHN and let people know what we're up to and how they can get involved if they would like to. So we have a few tools for you to do this. We have a whole set of outreach materials. So this is both kind of evergreen information about RHN, just basic stuff about what we do, how we operate, and then also some specifics on New York Heat specifically and ways for people to take action with that. So to do that, we have a link again that we'll put in the chat. Andra's already on it. And this is just a Google form. So if you are interested at all in doing any type of outreach to your neighbors, in your community, at any type of event, and you want some materials from RHN, just click that link and we will get you what you need. Similar to our lobbying trainings that we do, we're also going to do a little teach-in on summer outreach. So it can be kind of hard at the beginning to know, what exactly to talk about with RHN. As we just went over, we have been doing so much work. It can be hard to kind of fit it into a quick conversation with people, but once again, we have support for you to make that happen. So we are having a teach-in that will be on Tuesday, June 27th at 7:15 p.m. If you would like to get some more information, some training about how to table effectively, how to do your outreach in the most effective way and have fun while doing it, feel free to register. This will, of course, be recorded. So even if you can't make it on that Tuesday night, but you still want the information, make sure you're registering because we'll send the information to you that way. And yes, as Andrea is saying in the chat, we always send a follow-up email after these power hours with the recording, with all the links that were shared and all the key information. So if you have a friend that maybe wasn't able to make it tonight, or you are feeling the need to scramble and click all these links now, you don't have to. They'll be in your inbox ASAP. Okay, so before moving on, I just also want to take a moment to say that, having the time to rest and recharge over the summer is so crucial. And it's not only crucial for ourselves as individuals, but it's really critical for the movement. Like the idea of not depleting our resources more quickly than we can recharge them applies to all of us as well. So please do take the time to relax, to enjoy the nice summer weather, to enjoy the world around us that we're working to protect, so that we can coming into the next legislative session and be ready to go and have our cups filled and energized and ready to get these bills passed. So after our summer break, we will have our next campaign launch. So believe it or not, in a few months, we'll start this all up again as the legislative session is getting ready to get kicked off, and that will be on September 14th. So mark your calendars and save the date. We'll have our campaign kickoff then. And again, there is a link in the chat to register, but of course, we can also receive it in your inbox later. As a reminder, like I said before, we have this tabling and outreach teach-in that'll happen on the 27th of this month. And of course, all summer long, you can follow us on Twitter and help us build our Twitter followings. And as an immediate next step, can of course tweet and email at your legislators as well. So those are some to-dos as we are wrapping up tonight. But last but not least, just never forget how amazing and awesome you all are. I mean, the power that we were able to gather this session and the protection of our Climate Act, the passing of the Aldrich Building Act, all of the other ins and outs and in-betweens that came was all because of you all and the work that you've been doing. So I personally want to thank you all so much for all of your hard work. We are a few minutes before 8, so if anyone feels the need to share a little bit about, what you experienced throughout this last session, maybe a good story that you had, a funny moment from a lobbying meeting or a mobilization or a Twitter storm, we can open the floor up now and share a little bit before we wrap. And it looks like Andrea has her hand up. So Andrea, go ahead.
I wanted to draw attention to the fact that we have some questions in the chat. Maybe we have time to go through a few of those.
Sure. Andrea, do you want to read a couple of them?
Sure. So I'll start from bottom up because it's easiest for me to access it that way. Is Hochul agreeing to sign New York Heat if it passes in the assembly?
Great question. So Hochul has been very silent on New York Heat, and that is a problem. And part of our work right now is to hold the assembly accountable for not passing New York Heat, but also hold the governor accountable for not leading on New York Heat. So the governor last year in her budget put a little piece of New York Heat, an ending of the 100-foot rule, the subsidies for new gas hookups in the budget, in her budget, and it didn't get through. This year, she didn't even put that much in her budget. And during the budget negotiations, we really felt that the governor really should have been asking for and pushing for New York Heat along with the Senate to push the assembly to agree to the bill. And we did not hear anything from the governor about New York Heat in the media or anywhere. She has never come out and said anything about it. So not only has she not said whether or not she would sign it, she has not provided leadership and support on this issue, even while rate hikes are going on and will continue this year. We just saw a new rate hike request, a new rate hike proposal dropped yesterday from NYSEG and RG&E, paying for over $150 million in gas infrastructure and raising electric rates in NYSEG territory by 62% over 3 years. That 6% energy burden protection in the New York Heat Act, we need that now so that low-income people are not having to choose between heating and eating. So all of us need to be calling on the governor to stand up for us, to stand up against the gas industry, and to stand up for energy affordability and make this transition real. And we really, really hope that over the next several months, we can bring enough pressure on her and be speaking with her office and convince them to put New York Heat in their budget in January.
Another point made was that messages from now through next week should highlight urgency, noting that the climate smoke emergency could and will be followed by more and worse unless we transition from dirty fossil to clean energy as soon as possible. Scrolling back.
I totally agree. It's outrageous that at the end of session, even while people couldn't breathe, the legislature did nothing on the climate in the end of session. And, they need to hear from us about that because the climate emergency is happening and it's real and we're all feeling it. And we can't just keep burning fossil fuels.
Okay, I wanted to draw attention to another question that had a partial answer given in the chat. Do we have any news on whether actual manufacturers of heat pumps will build plants in New York State? And then one of the answers is that the Inflation Reduction Act does incentivize domestic heat pump production. But have any of us had any information about any glimmer of hope of anything being built in New York State?
So I would invite anybody who has heard anything about that to put something in the chat. But what I will say is that if the state sets targets for heat pump adoption that are enforceable so that the industry knows that this is going to happen, we can attract manufacturing to New York. It's happening with offshore wind because New York made a big commitment to offshore wind. We are now building components for offshore wind in New York. So we have an opportunity in New York to lead on this, to make sure that there's market certainty here, that we will be installing
hundreds of thousands of heat pumps in the next couple of decades, and that manufacturers should and can come to New York and have the certainty that their heat pumps will be bought.
Okay, next we have a question. My senator's latest excuse for not supporting is that constituents say they can't afford to upgrade their electric panels. Does EJA include that for low and moderate income households?
So that's a really great question. And this is a challenge that we are hearing all over the state. And that's why we are developing and will be introducing the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund next year. That is a fund that will pay for things like electrical panel upgrades, electrical wiring work that needs to be done, structural maintenance that needs to be done, all those kinds of things that people need for their homes and cannot afford right now. But we need them to be able to afford it because we need to be able to electrify homes. That is all going to be covered by the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification or GAP fund. So stay tuned, and we hope to fight with all of you for that fund in the budget next year.
Several people asked whether we need to target the Corporations Committee in order to get the New York Heat Act moved onto the Assembly agenda.
So I'll answer that question in two ways. One is we have been targeting the Corporations Committee. Multiple members of the Corporations Committee are supportive of the bill and have been asking for it to come to a vote. But the Corporations Committee is not going to be meeting, as far as we know, again, between now and the end of this session. However, so we don't need the Corporations Committee to bring this bill, to pass it through their committee in order to bring this bill to a vote this session. Because the Senate passed the bill, the Assembly can bring the bill straight to the floor and vote for it next week if they want to, if the political will is there. So this Corporations Committee thing is an excuse. If it doesn't get passed this session, we will need to get it through the Corporations Committee next year if we don't get it in the budget. So we have a few different pathways for getting it next year. But we do not need the Corporations Committee this year.
And another question.
We would like their support, but technically we don't need them. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Sorry, I misread your cues.
No, I was done and then I decided I wasn't.
We have a really good question. How will renters benefit from these bills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few different ways that renters would benefit from New York Heat. So first of all, New York Heat is an energy affordability bill. It will help bring down the cost of energy by avoiding unnecessary and costly investments in the gas system, both unnecessary and costly subsidies for new gas hookups and unnecessary and costly expansion and maintenance and replacement of gas pipelines, which can be avoided if we can electrify everybody on that pipeline. So just the cost savings with New York Heat would benefit everybody. The 6% energy burden cap, which is a policy that is in New York Heat that would ensure that nobody who's low or moderate income would pay more than 6% of their income on their energy bills, would also benefit low and moderate income renters. We also would benefit renters by being able to install heat pumps in rental units because they will provide air conditioning and heating. And in many ways, their comfort is superior to the fossil fuel equipment we have today. And the New York Heat Act enables entire neighborhoods to switch with the help of the utility. So we would hope that we would see if we can get the New York Heat Act passed, that the utility would be going to every building on the line, whether it's owner occupied or owned by a landlord, and helping move that building off of the gas system so that they can retire that gas pipeline.
Thank you. And I think I'll wind up with one more statement. Someone said, how about a teach-in party in Zabrowski's district this summer? And I'm going to say, how about sending us where you think it would be good to have these teach-in parties, or finding an event that's happening and we could have materials there. That's a really great idea. And I will pass it back to Bryn.
Okay, I just noticed it's 8:02, so I will let you all go, but we just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you one more time for all of your amazing work. We hope you have such a wonderful summer break, and we really look forward to seeing you all as we're going into the next legislative session. So thanks again. We're not going anywhere. We're always around if you ever need anything. But we hope everyone has a really nice night and take care.